This is not a story of poverty. This is not a story of lack. This is a story of capture. A continent rich in resources, rich in culture, rich in intellect, yet choked not by what it doesn't have, but by who controls what it has. Welcome to the age of the Godfather. In many African nations, power does not flow from the people. It does not even flow from the constitution. It flows from shadows of men and sometimes women, who sit behind the curtain pulling strings, installing leaders, removing leaders, and deciding the fate of millions, without ever appearing on a ballot. They are not elected, but they are obeyed. They are not accountable, but they are feared. They are the architects of a silent system, a system where loyalty is currency and competence is a liability. This is the Godfather Syndrome. Imagine a nation as a ship. The people are the passengers. The economy is the engine. The government is the crew. But the captain is not the one holding the wheel. The real captain is someone hidden below deck whispering orders, threatening mutiny, and ensuring that the ship never strays from its personal map, even if it sails straight into a storm. That's the reality of many African states today. In this system, elections become ceremonies, not choices. Ballot boxes become ritual objects, not instruments of change. And leadership becomes a debt owed not to the people, but to the Godfather who funded the rise. And when a leader owes his seat to a Godfather, he does not govern with vision. He governs with fear. Fear of dismissing the hand that placed him there. Fear of losing protection. And fear of exposure. So instead of serving the nation, he services the network. This is why roads are built halfway. This is why hospitals are without equipment. This is why schools produce graduates without skills. Because the goal is not development. The goal is maintenance. Maintain the loyalty. Maintain the control. Maintain the flow of resources. Upwards, not outwards. Godfatherism is not just corruption. It is not just nepotism. It is a parallel government. A government that does not appear in law, but overrides it. A government that does not speak publicly, but is always heard. A government that does not campaign, but always wins. And here is the most dangerous part. This system does not just live in politics. It is reinforced by tribe. It is justified by religion. It is defended by party loyalists. It becomes a culture, a way of thinking, where people no longer ask, is he capable? They ask, is he one of us? Is he loyal? And who is behind him? When loyalty becomes the highest qualification, incompetence becomes inevitable. And when incompetence controls power, underdevelopment is not just an accident, it is a guarantee. This episode is not just an analysis, it is an exposure. We will peel back the layers of this system, from the political godfathers who install leaders, to the structures that protect them, to the societal loyalties that keep them alive. We will connect the dots, from loyalty to incompetence to mismanagement to wastage, to the cycle of underdevelopment that has kept a continent running in circles. But more importantly, we will ask the question many are afraid to ask. Can Africa ever break free from a system that so many benefit from? Or has the Godfather Syndrome become too deep, too normalized, too powerful to remove? This is not just politics. This is power. This is control. This is the invisible hand that shapes visible failure. Welcome to the Godfather Syndrome.
Strength of Africa TV presents The Godfather Syndrome.
How loyalty overrides leadership in Africa.
In the shadows where the kingmakers hide, the shores in their hands, they control the tide. Voices are silenced, loyalty sold. Dreams of the people are actioned for gold. Thrones are not lacoyably given. Fear writes the laws in a kingdom won't live in. Power in whispers, not in the light. A nation held hostage in broad daylight. Break these trees, let the people rise. No more rule from behind disguise. We want truth, not a puppet show. Let the real leaders finally grow. From the ashes, a new dawn calls. No more godfathers behind the walls.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Depending on where you are at this moment, I'm your host, Adebayo Oladokun, and this is Strength of Africa TV, where truth meets courage, where the past is reawakened and the future of the motherland is reclaimed. Today's episode is titled The Godfather Syndrome: How Loyalty Overrides Leadership in Africa. Let's start with the origin and evolution of godfatherism in Africa. How this system was built and normalized. Every system, no matter how corrupt, has an origin story. Godfatherism did not fall from the sky. It was not born overnight. It was built step by step, decade by decade, crisis by crisis. To understand the Godfather, you must first understand the vacuum. When many African nations emerged from colonial rule, they inherited states but not strong institutions. They inherited flags but not functional systems. They inherited power but not the discipline to manage it. So, what happens when structures are weak? Power does not disappear, it relocates. It moves from institutions to individuals. Instead of strong parliaments, you had strong men. Instead of independent systems, you had dependent networks. Instead of rule of law, you had rule of access. Access to who? Access to the one who controls the door. This is where the first godfather were born. Not always as villains, but as fixers. Men who could navigate chaos. Men who could fund campaigns. Men who could mobilize ethnic or religious bases. Men who could get things done when the systems could not. And when a system fails, people begin to trust those who can bypass it. But here's the shift. The moment where survival turned into control, the fixer became the kingmaker. No longer satisfied with influence, they began to install leaders, handpicked, hand-funded, hand-controlled. Not because they were the best, but because they were the most loyal. And it does not end at the top. Power is not just about who becomes president. It's about who fills the rooms around him. Cabinets are not always built for competence. They are assembled for comfort. Ministers are not always selected for their understanding of policy, but for their history of loyalty. Technocrats who should be the brains of government are sometimes reduced to decoration. Favoritism becomes the filter. Nepotism becomes the criteria. A brother-in-law becomes an advisor. A long-time ally becomes a minister. A party loyalist with limited experience becomes the architect of national policy. And just like that, the system is not just controlled at the top. It is replicated across every layer. In countries like Nigeria, the term godfatherism became not just a concept, but a political reality. Powerful figures behind the scenes openly determined who contested, who won, and who was removed. In some cases, When a godson refused to obey, the same hand that lifted him up was used to tear him down. Loyalty was not optional, it was contractual. And this model did not stay in one country. It spreads like a virus adapting to different hosts. In Kenya, political dynasty began to shape power structures, where family names carried more weight than policy ideas. In Uganda, a long-standing power network created systems where access to the center determined survival. In South Africa, factional loyalties within parties often overshadowed national interest. Different countries, different contexts, but the same underlying code. Control power by controlling who gets power. And here is where it becomes dangerously normal. People begin to see it as the only way. Young politicians no longer ask, who do I serve? They ask, who do I align with? Aspiring leaders do not build ideas, they build alliances. Not with the people, but with the powerful. This is how a system becomes culture. And when a system becomes culture, it no longer needs to be enforced, it enforces itself. A voter defends a bad leader because he is our son. A party member ignores failure because we must protect the party. A religious follower justifies injustice because he is anointed. A tribe protects incompetence because we must not lose power. And just like that, the Godfather does not even need to speak, the system speaks for him. Let's look at the case studies. This is not theory. This is not speculation. This is evidence drawn from real events, real people, and real consequences. Let us step out of abstraction and into reality. Case study 1. Control and consequence of your states in Nigeria. In Nigeria, the political conflict between Lamidi Adedibu and Rashid Ladoja, the new Olubadan of Ibadan, exposed the contractual nature of power. A godfather funded the rise, engineered the victory. But when governance began, control was demanded. When that control was resisted, the system responded. Impeachment, pressure, political isolation. The message was simple. You may hold office, but you do not hold power. Case study 2. Coercion and state breakdown, Anambra. In Nigeria, the dramatic fallout between Chris Uba and Chris Ngige pushed Godfatherism into the extreme. A city governor was abducted, not by outsiders, but through a system designed to enforce loyalty. His crime? Attempting to govern without full submission. This was not democracy under strain. This was democracy overridden. Case study 3. Structured control, Lagos political machine. In Lagos State, the influence of Bola Ahmed Tinubu represents a more sophisticated model. Here, power is not loud, it is organized. Candidates do not just emerge, they are filtered through structure. Governorship aspirants are aligned with a political framework that defines viability. Over time, multiple leaders have risen through this system with expectations of continuity. This is not chaos, it is engineering. But the core principle remains. Access to power is not completely open. The relationship between Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Akinwumi Ambode became a defining moment in the dynamics of structured political control. Ambode, who emerged through the established political machine, was initially seen as a continuation of an ordered succession framework. However, as his administration progressed, signs of policy independence and a perceived deviation from expected political alignments began to create frictions within the power that facilitated its rise. The turning point came ahead of the party primaries, where the support of the established political network shifted away from Ambode. In an unprecedented move for an incumbent governor in the state, he failed to secure the party's nomination for a second term, effectively ending his re-election bid. This episode underscored a critical reality within such systems. Performance in office does not always guarantee political continuity. Alignment with the underlying power structure remains a decisive factor. Case study 4. Dynastic dominance, Kwara's political structure. In Kwara State, the legacy of Olusola Saraki demonstrated how Godfatherism can evolve into a political dynasty. For years, political success was closely tied to a single power structure. Endorsement became electability. The system was so deep that it functioned as a political empire, where loyalty outweighed independence. But eventually, the structure faced resistance. A reminder that no system, no matter how entrenched, is beyond challenge. Case 35. Power after power, River State dynamics. In River State, the political influence of Nyesom Wike shows the next phase of Godfatherism. This is not just about installation, it's about control after exit. Structures are built not just to win power, but to retain influence beyond office. Succession becomes strategic. The key question is not just who can govern, but who can be trusted to protect the network. And when that trust is uncertain, tension emerges. This is modern Godfatherism, post-power dominance. Case 36. Structural variance across Africa. This system is not isolated. In Kenya, political legacies linked to figures like Jomo Kenyatta and Daniel Arap Moi shaped long-term access to power. In South Africa, the period associated with Jacob Zuma exposed network-driven influence over state structures. Different countries, different expressions, but the same core idea. Power is not always where it appears. Now, a look at the chains of allegiance, how tribe, religion, and party loyalty sustain the Godfather system. Power does not survive on force alone. It survives on belief. The Godfather does not rule with an army. He rules with an allegiance. Allegiance that is emotional, not rational. Allegiance that is inherited, not questioned. If Godfatherism is the engine, then tribe, religion, and party loyalty are the fuel. Remove them and the system stalls. Feed them and the system thrives. Let us begin with tribe. Tribe, in its purest form, is identity. It is history. It is belonging. But in the hands of politics, it becomes a weapon. In many African states, elections are not contests of idea. They are censuses of identity. Who has the numbers? Who controls the largest ethnic base? Who can mobilize our people? Imagine a hospital where doctors are not hired based on skill but based on surname. Will you trust the surgery? Now, imagine a nation where leaders are selected not because they are capable, but because they belong. That is the reality. When tribe becomes the lens, competence becomes invisible. A bad leader from our side is still preferred to a good leader from the other side. And this is where the Godfather smiles, because a divided people are easy to control. Now, religion. Religion is meant to guide morality, to hold power accountable, to speak truth to authority. But in many cases, it has been reversed. It now protects power instead of questioning it. When a political figure is wrapped in spiritual language, criticism becomes blasphemy. Touch not the anointed. He is chosen. God installed him. And just like that, accountability dies in the name of faith. In some instances, religious leaders themselves become power brokers, endorsing candidates, mobilizing followers, and negotiating political influence. Not always for the people, but sometimes for access. When the pulpit and the podium begin to speak the same language, the line between spiritual guidance and political manipulation disappears. And again, the Godfather does not need to campaign. The altar does it for him. Now the party. Political parties are meant to be vehicles of ideas, platforms for policy, instruments for democracy. But in the Godfather system, they become private clubs. Loyalty to party becomes more important than loyalty to country. A leader fails, but the party defends him. A policy collapses, but the party justifies it. A scandal erupts, but the party suppresses it. Why? Because to challenge the leader is to threaten the network. And to threaten the network is to risk exile. The party becomes a shield against criticism, a shield against consequences, a shield against change. And when tribe, religion, and party begin to align, the system becomes bulletproof. But the shield does more than protect, it selects. Within party structures, the right to technical and cabinet positions is really a pure merit process. It is a loyalty ladder. Those who defend the party most aggressively are often rewarded, not with symbolic positions, but with strategic ones. Positions that require expertise are filled with allegiance. A finance portfolio in the hands of a political defender. A health ministry led by someone with no health background. A technocratic office occupied by a political debt. And when competence questions such appointments, it is labeled disloyalty. This is how ineptitude finds legitimacy. My people, what about the cost of loyalty? How incompetence, mismanagement, and wastage becomes national policy. Every system has a price. The price of godfatherism is not paid by the Godfather. It is paid by the people. When loyalty becomes the entry requirement for power, competence becomes optional. And when competence is optional, failure becomes systemic. Imagine boarding an airplane where the pilot was not selected because he could fly, but because he was loyal to the owner of the airline. Will you feel safe? Now understand this. Millions of people are living daily in nations where the pilots of policy were not chosen for their skill, but for their submission. This is where the damage begins. In a healthy system, positions are filled by expertise. Engineers build roads. Economists shape policy. Doctors run health systems. But in a captured system, positions are filled by alliance. Friends, loyalists, financiers, political IOUs. The result? A government that looks complete but functions empty. Projects are launched not because they are needed, but because they are profitable to the network. Contracts are awarded not to the most qualified, but to the most connected. Budgets are designed not for impact, but for extraction. This is how wastage is engineered. A road is announced with great fanfare but stops halfway. A hospital is commissioned but has no equipment. A school is built but has no teachers. The structure exists, but the function is missing. Like a body without organs, like a shell without life. This is not accidental, it is structural. When a leader owes his position to a godfather, his first responsibility is not performance, it is repayment. Repayment through contracts, repayment through appointments, repayment through access. And every repayment comes at a cost to public services, a cost to economic growth, a cost to national trust. This is how mismanagement becomes policy. Decisions are not made based on what works, but based on who benefits. A power plant is delayed because a contractor must be changed. A policy is reversed because it threatens a network. A reform is abandoned because it reduces control. And slowly, the system begins to eat itself. Economies stagnate. Youth employment rises. Public trust collapses. But here is the most dangerous effect. Mediocrity becomes normal. When people see that hard work does not lead to progress, but connections do, they adapt. Excellence is discouraged. Dependence is rewarded. This is how a nation loses its edge, and this is where the damage multiplies because government is not run by one person. It is run by a network, a cabinet, a body of technocrats. When that body is infected by favoritism and nepotism, ineptitude does not remain isolated, it becomes systemic. Decisions are made without technical depth. Policies are designed without professional insight. Implementation is handled without operational competence. And the consequences? Plans that look good on paper but collapse in practice. A minister who cannot interpret data. An advisor who cannot challenge authority. A technocrat who is afraid to speak because his position is not earned but given. This is not just mismanagement, this is organized ineptitude. Let's examine how to break the Godfather system and rebuild leadership from the ground up. Every disease that becomes chronic eventually demands surgery. Not pain relief, not temporary treatment, surgery, precise, deliberate, and uncompromising. The Godfather Syndrome is not a surface problem. It is not a campaign issue. It is not a single election failure. It is a deep, systemic, entrenched condition. And systemic conditions do not respond to symbolic actions. You do not cure a cancer by changing the patient's clothes. You remove the tumor. Africa does not just need new leaders, it needs a new logic of leadership. The first cut must be in the mind. As long as people vote based on tribe, defend based on religion, and align based on party, the system will regenerate itself. You cannot destroy Godfatherism while feeding it with emotional loyalties. The most powerful revolution is not in the streets, it's in the perception. When a voter looks at a ballot and asks, "What can you do?" instead of "Who are you connected to?" This is the beginning of surgery. When a citizen refuses to defend failure just because it wears a familiar face, that's the first incision. But mindset alone is not enough. The second cut must be in the system. Strong institutions are the enemies of Godfathers. Because institutions do not owe loyalty, they follow process. An independent judiciary does not care who funded your campaign. A functional electoral body does not care who endorsed you. A transparent procurement system does not care who you owe. This is why weak institutions are not accidental, they are strategic. To break the system, institutions must become stronger than individuals. Not symbolically, but operationally. Open budget systems that expose every allocation. Merit-based appointments that prioritize competence over connection. When systems become transparent, loyalty loses its value. The third cut must be in accountability. As long as there are no consequences, there will be no change. A system where failure is rewarded with reappointment, where corruption is protected by alliance, where incompetence is defended by identity, is a system that invites collapse. Accountability must be feasible, consistent, and unavoidable. Not selective justice, not political targeting, but structural accountability. When a leader fails, he leaves. When a system is abused, it is investigated. When public funds are misused, they are recovered. And most importantly, when a Godfather attempts to capture the system resists. The fourth cut must be in leadership pipelines. You cannot build a new system with the same recruitment logic. If politics remains a game of access, then only those with access will play. Africa must lower the barriers to entry for competent, independent minds. Young leaders who are not owned, professionals who are not indebted, thinkers who are not controlled, but this comes with a cost. Independent leadership is harder to sustain. It does not have godfathers to protect it. It relies on the people. And that means the people must be ready to defend it. This is the final court, citizen responsibility. No system, no matter how perfect, can survive a disengaged population. When people say their votes, they say their voice. When people defend failure, they extend their suffering. When people remain silent, they empower the system. The end of godfatherism is not a movement, it is a process. A process of unlearning, a process of rebuilding, a process of resisting. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. Because you are not just removing a system, you are removing a culture. But here's the truth. Every great transformation in history required disruption. And Africa stands at that threshold. The old system is no longer delivering. The results are visible. The consequences are clear. The only question left is, will the continent continue to manage the symptoms or finally perform the surgery? This is not just about politics. This is about destiny. A continent that was never meant to follow now struggles to lead. Not because it lacks capacity, but because it has normalized control. The Godfather Syndrome is not just a political problem, it is a mental condition. It is the belief that power must be handed down, not earned. That loyalty is more important than capability. That connections matter more than contribution. And as long as this belief remains, no election will save the system. No policy will fix the damage. No leader will last without compromise. Because the problem is not just who leads, it is how leaders are made. Imagine an Africa where leaders are not selected in backrooms but emerge from competence. Where loyalty is to the constitution, not to individuals. Where tribe is identity, not strategy. Where religion is guidance, not justification. Where party is platform, not prison. That Africa is possible. But it will not be given, it must be built. And building it requires one thing, courage. The courage to question. The courage to reject. The courage to think independently. The courage to break from the familiar. Because sometimes the greatest enemy of progress is not oppression, it is comfort. Comfort in loyalty, comfort in identity, comfort in the known. But progress demands discomfort. And until that discomfort is embraced, the cycle will continue. New leaders, same chains, same faces, same system. New promises, same outcome. But the moment a people decide no more, the moment they prioritize competence over connection, truth over tribe, accountability over alliance, that moment the Godfather loses power. Not gradually, but completely. Because in the end, Godfathers do not rule nations, people do. The only question is, are the people ready to take their power back? This is the Godfather Syndrome, and now you see it. I'm your host, Adebayo Oladokun, and this is Strength of Africa TV. If you found value in this conversation, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Endeavor to join our membership and give super thanks. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Rumble. For advert placements, visit us online at Strength of Africa TV. Watch out for the next episode. You don't want to miss it. Until then, tell your own story, because Africa's future is written in African ink. Stay rooted, stay bold, stay African. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next episode. Bye.
In the shadows where the kingmakers hide, controls in their hands, they control the tide. Voices are silenced, loyalty sold. Dreams of the people are auctioned for gold. Thrones are not ours, quietly given. Fear writes the laws in a kingdom one live in. Power in whispers, not in the light. A nation held hostage in broad daylight. Break these trees, let the people rise. No more rule from behind disguise. We want truth, not a puppet show. Let the real leaders find us.